I lost and found a button of my suit, and that's how I'm going to start my speech today. I'm glad to be here. But I'm actually angry. That's why I'd like to share with you the things that make me angry as an LGBT person, as a gay man. But don't worry, this is not a kind of anger that consumes. It's not a kind of anger that makes one violent. It's a kind of anger that provokes determination, provokes courage, even tenacity, to fight this lonely battle against bigotry, homophobia, transphobia, and dehumanization. This is a kind of anger that fuels a stronger commitment to fight for equality. 2 Sundays ago, to be exact, September 16, 11:25 in the morning, John Ace Hernandez died of cardiac arrest. Ace was my assistant for many years. With him was his boyfriend of 8 years, Mark, who, when he died, immediately gave the bag of Ace to his closest of kin, his biological daughters. The bag contained his passport, his passbook, and other personal effects, because Mark knew that he had no legal rights. Right after, they started to talk about the arrangements, where he was going to be brought, what hospital, was the wake going to be held in the compound of the family or in a funeral home, what was he to wear, what about the insurances and other things. Mark was there. He was the love of Ace's life for 8 years. He was the center of his universe. But Mark was voiceless. He was invisible. Because in this country, gay love between 2 men is not recognized by law. In this country, gay love between 2 men is not equal to the love between a man and a woman. And that makes me angry. Early on in my life, I was made to understand that for me to matter, I had to be a young, normal boy. I had to be a young, normal boy. I had to blend. I had to be accepted. If I wanted to be happy, I had to blend with the other boys. I had to be a young, normal boy. And young, normal boys played basketball. So I was required to play basketball. Not by my tatay or nanay, but by people around me, by friends. I was pressured, actually, to play basketball. So I was about 9, 10 years old. I started to learn how to play basketball. I learned how to dribble balls. It's a good thing, because eventually I learned how to manage all kinds of balls. But I did study hard. Afternoons would be spent learning how to dribble balls and how to shoot balls. I had this particular friend who was extremely kind and would spend time with me para turuan ho ako how to shoot balls. And I would play basketball in the town plaza. It was fun. But every time I'd get into the basketball court, I'd get lost. I would try my best. I would try to apply everything that I would learn in my basketball practices, but I was a failure. I didn't have the alacrity of basketball players. I would end up being distracted by the sweaty thighs of the other young boys. But God knows how much I tried. And there was another thing, to be a young normal boy in my small town of Borongan, Eastern Samar. For you to blend and for you to be accepted, you had to like another young, normal girl. I also tried that. I had to like a young, normal girl. So I started visiting another girl, a young girl. And we would do small talk. I avoided the dolls. I pretended not to appreciate them. And we became very good friends. But every time I'd go to their house, I would end up spending more time with her brother. I was a failure. I couldn't like another young, normal girl. So, I was bad at basketball. I didn't like a young, normal girl. I could hardly blend. I went into other things. I was lucky because I had a mother. I had a mother who knew. I mean, Tatay and I never talked about my being gay. I thought they knew. It was not something that we talked about over dinner, or Nanay being mad at my liking to play with most of the girls in the neighborhood. And I did. I played with the boys. I played with the girls. We did bahay-bahayan. But I was never the father nor the mother. I was always the priest. I was always the priest. And that made me angry to a certain point. Why couldn't I be the father or even the mother? And, but generally it was a happy childhood. I had a mother who would push me to join contests, who would push me to join declamation oratorical contests. And it was at this point in my life when Nanay told me, even before the contest begins, you are my winner. With a mother like my mother, how can you lose? That was my childhood. Another thing that makes me angry is when someone comes to you and says, and I have this friend who has so much opinions about everything, even if you don't talk to her. You know, boy, I love gays. I love to be in the company of LGBTQIA. She doesn't know about QIA. I love to be in the company of LGBT people. You're just some of the most creative people. You're the best designers. You're the best fashion designers, the best interior designers, etc., etc. And I would just stare at her. One time she also came to me very politely, and she was talking to me and she was asking me questions like, boy, what's your take on when people say, you know, there is this notion that when you're gay or when you are LGBT, especially gay men, you're supposed to be people who back off from fights. You're people who are not confrontational. I said, you're looking at the wrong person. You're people who, I mean, short of saying you are cowards. This is not what I think. My friend made sure that. This is what I hear about gays and people talk about them, mga duwag. And, you know, we listen to people say, labanan mo, para ka namang bakla eh. Ba't ka maatras? Ba't hindi mo harapin? And sometimes people taunt other people to fight back by actually saying, bakla. Bakla, 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 bakla. I remember my days when I was a boy, because there is this particular street in Borongan called Royal Street. And I was so afraid to walk through this street because all the bullies of the town were there. And out of nowhere, every time I and my friends would go through that street, you would hear voices from everywhere. Bayot, bayot, bayot. That's what I word for bakla. I was okay. Sometimes we would fight back, sometimes we would just run really fast. It became a weapon. I was a fast runner because I wanted to be invisible. But what was hard was when these things were done in the presence of your parents. We would walk to church, and that was the only way to church or to the town plaza. With Tatay and Nanay, that was a horrid experience. To be called names by people, by voices coming out of nowhere. It gutted me in a way. It broke me in a way that up to this very moment, I would catch myself in a posture that would not make anybody suspect I am gay. Of course, everybody knows I'm gay. But that's Royal Street to me. I was just so afraid to go through that street because as a young boy, I was supposed to back off from fights. So when this friend was talking to me about what people thought about gays being creative and being cowards, among many other things, you have this kind of anger inside you because you just want to say a lot of things. And I once told her over dinner, you know, That's right. We have some of the best designers of the world. But what a disservice it is to men and women who also excel in the design field. Because I think everybody does. You don't have to be a lesbian, a gay man, or a transgender woman, man to excel in the creative fields. Everybody has a chance and opportunity. But yes, we're some of the best. We're some of the best stylists. We're some of the best fashion designers. But we're more than that. We're many. We can be many, I told my friend. And I love telling this story about some of the people I look up to in the LGBT community. Of course, I pay tribute to the men and women, to the LGBT people who fought valiantly in the Stonewall riots in New York in 1969, fighting against the brutal police of New York. They could not have been anything less than brave. And I love telling the story of Oscar Wilde, the great poet, the great novelist, playwright, picture of Dorian Gray, importance of being earnest. And I would always say yes, at the end of his life he was incarcerated because of a crime, and that crime was being himself, because he was gay. Because during that time homosexuality was a crime. He was sent to prison, punished with hard labor, and died inside prison. That makes you angry. That makes me angry. I remember the story of Alan Turing, considered to be the father of modern computer. He was a lead scientist during the Second World War for Great Britain. He decoded the German enigma that paved the way for the victory of Great Britain over Germany in the Second World War. Alan Turing, like Oscar Wilde, were gay people. Alan Turing was also found guilty of the crime of homosexuality. He fell in love with a young boy of 19 and brought to court for trial, and was punished. He was actually made to choose because of what he achieved for Great Britain, between life imprisonment and chemical castration. And stories have it that he chose the latter. One day he was found to have killed himself with an apple beside his bed, partially bitten and poison laden. Alan Turing was a great man. He was a gay man. It took decades for Great Britain, if my memory serves me right, to apologize to him. I think it was in 2008 with Prime Minister Gordon Brown issuing an apology to the estate of Alan Turing after having been pressured by an online campaign. We are scientists. We are poets. We are playwrights. And there is the great Bayard Rustin. He was proudly gay. He was the man who introduced the pacifist concepts of Gandhi to the great Dr. Martin Luther King. Bayard Rustin was the lead organizer of the Great March in Washington in 1963. And it was Bayard Rustin who spoke about his political principles that shaped him, that somehow affected Martin Luther King. He believed in pacifism. He believed in nonviolent activism. He believed in constitutional means. They still resonate today. He believed in democratic procedures and respect for the human personality. He believed that all people are one. Bayard Rustin died in 1987, and he continues to inspire. He continues to inspire. It was him, and it makes me proud, not angry, to think that he organized the Great Washington March, where the legendary Dr. Martin Luther King delivered the iconic "I Have a Dream" speech. So we are activists, we are biologists, we're basketball players, we are many. We are talk show hosts like the great Ellen DeGeneres, whose story continues to inspire many of us. It was not easy. But the hardest journey she had to take was to get to who she is. And who she is today is a lesbian woman who's one of the biggest names in global television. She continues to inspire. But the story of Ellen and her mother is something, again, that makes me angry. Makes me, she's jobless for years. She's jobless for years only because she came out as a lesbian woman. I remember just before I started a career on television, I was dabbling in public relations. I was doing consultancy jobs, and one of the jobs that I did was to be with GMA7. I was a consultant for corporate PR for Channel 7, and I did that job for a couple of years. And large part of my job was just talking and talking and talking and talking. Thank you, Richard, for saying I'm educated. Thank you very much. And part of my job was, no, but I loved it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you. It was not easy to get that PhD. It's not honorary. I worked hard for it for 6 years. And it was, thank you. I just remembered because when I was doing consultancy jobs, I had not even finished college during that time. But I was acting as if I had a doctoral degree in social development. It happened, though, years later. So when I was a consultant for GMA7, I was talking about a lot of things. They would ask me about stars. And then I was also managing artists. I was managing artists. So in the middle of many conversations, one day I got a call from the great Bobby Barrero, who said, "Would you like to be on television?" I said yes. I say yes to anything. Had he asked me to be a pole dancer, I would have said yes. Had he asked me to be, yes, that's true, from the bottom of my heart. Had he asked me to be a guest relations officer for some club, I would have done it so well. But then he said, "Would you like to do television work? Would you like to be on cam?" And I said yes. I say yes to anything. I don't say no. I say yes, especially to things that I don't know of. I say yes to things that make me uncertain. I say yes to things that make me fidgety. I pray for nerves. Nagdadasal ho ako sa Diyos ng nervyos dahil pag hindi ako ninenervyos ng konti, give me a mic and I'll talk forever. So when I was asked to do television, I said, yes, I will try. Also thinking that it was not going to happen. So I just said yes politely to Bobby. But it did happen. It did happen. I remember being asked to go to a hotel in Makati because I was to meet the beautiful Gretchen Barreto. I didn't know why. I said, this may be a test of who is more beautiful, but I did go. I did go to the meeting. And I arrived, and Gretchen was there, who was so welcoming, kind, funny, and she has become one of my best friends in life. I didn't know that I was actually auditioning, and they wanted to see me with Gretchen, and they wanted to see if we had rapport together. And that started one of the shows I did for GMA7. But before I started to do television, I had this friend. He's still a friend of mine. He's one of the biggest names in Philippine television. He came to me and said, "Boy, I'd like to let you know that it may be good to reconsider. You don't need television as an on-cam talent." He was discouraging me from doing television. And I said, "Bakit? Why not?" And after coaxing for quite a while, he finally gave in and said, "I have a couple of reasons. I have a number of reasons why you shouldn't do television. Number one," sabi niya, "it sounds good in Tagalog, hindi ka masyadong kagandahan." And that hurt, of course. Even if I wanted to be Miss Universe, I was not good looking enough to be in front of the camera. And I started to think, and I said, tama nga naman, who were hosting during this time? My dear friend Eduardo Manzano, the late Miguel Rodriguez, Martin Rivera was doing Penthouse Live. So he was making sense. I was not good looking enough to be in front of the camera. So I just kept on listening. I said, "Ano pa? What else?" boy, one day you're going to own your marketing firm. You're a brand specialist. You will be head of an advertising agency. But in front of the camera is not a world you will enjoy. It's tough. You know, people are cruel. You're being validated every day. You're told how many people watch you every night. And you have a show today. The next day you find a memo or somebody telling you this is your last show. So the second reason he gave me as to why I should even try television was you have this quaint Waray accent. Pero totoo ho yan, because from Waray, from being Waray from Samar, you know, I came to Manila and tatay worked so hard. I got to the Ateneo de Manila University, and one of my biggest frustrations was I couldn't get the Araneo accent. Hindi ko talaga kinaya. I was so amazed. I was so amazed by the way my classmates looked during that time. Ang gaganda ng kutis, that flawless skin. They spoke a certain twang. You know, I would just listen, watch them. But to this day, I couldn't get the Araneo accent. So my friend was saying, waray ka. You know, the accent is always there. The accent is always there. So I said, okay, it was a third one. Third one, he said, because you're gay. Bakla ka. And in this day and age, and this is what, late 80s, early 90s, gays were some of the best comedians. Every time you needed a punchline, itinutulak ka sa labas ng bintana, you fall, and people laugh, and that was how you were supposed to be in the entertainment industry. That's an over-exaggeration, but partly true. I said, yes, I'm not beautiful enough maybe to your eyes, but I apologize, I told my friend, but you're not looking at me intently. In other words, he was not looking at my beauty. You know, I mentioned Ace earlier, my assistant. He used to say, and the most important lesson I learned from him was that he used to say, habang nagkakagulo silang lahat, habang nagkakagulo silang lahat kung sino ang pinakamaganda, alam ko maganda rin ako. At pag hindi nila nakikita, hindi ko kasalanan. Silang may kasalanan. So my friend was not seeing my beauty, and that was okay. It had to take a couple of years before I declared myself as the most beautiful. I didn't realize it had to come from us, and no one had the right to define anybody's beauty. But it hurt. The second one was that I had a Waray brogue, an Irish brogue, as my friend would say. It was difficult in the beginning because I am Waray. That's part of my being. Until I learned that to be able to develop brand equity, I needed to be Waray. I needed to be true to who I was. I needed to be honest to my core. This is part of who I am. Sabi ng nanay ko, kaya ganyan ang accent natin dahil malapit tayo sa araw. I didn't know what she meant, but the Waray accent should say. You wouldn't believe me, but for the longest time, I was so afraid to open my mouth. You wouldn't believe that. Kasi takot na takot ako maging Bisaya. You know how it is in Imperial Manila when people jeer and laugh at people, ay, Bisaya. You know, when you mispronounce a word, when E becomes E and O becomes U, it is as if accent defines the mind of anyone. That has to stop. But I was so afraid to open my mouth because I was so afraid to commit mistakes. I was afraid to be Bisaya. I was afraid to be Waray, when in fact I am, will always be. It took a couple of years not couple, but many years to realize that for me to be different, for me to find my equity, I had to stick to who I was. And then I was gay. I told my friend I don't understand why I wouldn't make it simply because of my sexual preference, But years later, in 2011, I bumped into my friend by accident in Singapore during the Asian Television Awards, and we had a nice chat. I got the trophy for Best Host and the Best Public Affairs program for The Bottom Line in Singapore for the Asian Television Awards. And I thought my friend had forgotten what he told me. But he didn't. He said, I apologize to you. I said, you don't have to. Because he remembered what he said, that I would not make it because I was gay, I was waray, and I was not beautiful enough. And he said, I apologize. But I was just concerned. And I knew he meant well. And I knew he meant well. He's still one of my, not anymore best friends. He's still a friend. I don't see him often, but I said, I accept your apology. I accept your apology. But I made sure that he and I learned the important lesson of prudence, the important lesson of equality, the important lesson of giving others opportunities, and not counting people out simply because they are different from what we see. And I said, I understand, but please don't do it again. But if you want someone to succeed, do it again. Because I said, I was gay, I was waray, I am gay, and I'm not good looking enough to you. But what if I use these 3 reasons to make it? And I did. And I did. And believe me, it was not easy. It was not easy, because people are not always nice. People are not always nice. And that makes me angry. But I got where I am today because of that kind of anger that fueled hard work, fueled, as I said, kapal ng mukha, tenacity, a certain kind of bravery that pushed me to do the things I thought I could not, simply because people thought and said I could not do certain things. And another thing that makes me angry are violence against LGBT people and hate crimes against LGBT people. It's really funny because a couple of years ago there was a gay man who was stabbed 72 times, and I did an interview with a policeman and I said, what happened? What crime is this? And he said, this is robbery. This is robbery. In this country, again, I don't know why it's so difficult to call a hate crime a hate crime. But that's for another discourse. And violence against LGBT people of all kinds. And sometimes violence, discrimination come from people who actually love us. In my province, I went home a couple of weeks ago, you still have mothers and fathers calling their children not by their names, but fondly calling them, bakla, halika dito, paabot nga ng damit. Tomboy, halika nga dito, paano nga ng tubig. One time I told the mother, your daughter has a name. Your daughter has a name. Why don't you call her by her name? And some years ago, there was a father who doused boiling water on his clueless, hapless young son who was sleeping because his father was exasperated because he couldn't cure the homosexuality of his son, thinking that by dousing boiling water he would change the sexual orientation of his child. In this country and in some parts of the world, you still have parents who believe in curative rape. They think that by having their lesbian daughters raped, they would be curing them of their lesbianism. I love to say that in 1973, homosexuality has been stricken out of the manual for mental health disorders by the World Health Organization. But some people still think that being gay, that being LGBT is a disease that is curable. Sama ka ng sama dyan sa mga taong yan. Ayan, naging bakla ka tuloy. Hindi naman kayo nanganganak, pero dumadami kayo. I mean, facetiously, pejoratively, in jest, people would joke about who we are. Just earlier, I was talking to Fire, and I was saying my dream at the moment is to do a census of who we are and how many we are in this country. Some people would say we're 10 minutes, 10% of the population. I said, I want to know, because that's where power can come from. We will work hard at it. We have to know each other. I know the LGBT community is not a paradise. It's not a paradise. This is a struggle, just like many other struggles, like the women's movement, like the anti-slavery movement. There are many problems in the community, but so be it. We are bound together by the same struggle. And just an hour ago, I got a call from a friend who loves to joke. And I told him that I was going to be here and I was going to talk to an audience about some stories on LGBT matters, and said, you know, boy, come to think about it. In the Garden of Eden, there were Adam, Eve, the snake, the apple, and the tree. There was no LGBT person present. And I said, alam mo, promise me you will not tell anyone. Just promise me. And I will tell you the secret of the Garden of Eden. He took me serious. I said, promise, and I will tell you. And he said, I promise. I said, okay. That was one tree. And Adam, Eve, the snake, the serpent, the tree, the apple tree was there. It was in one corner of the Garden of Eden. Around other places in the Garden of Eden were other trees. And the LGBT people were there enjoying the apples, the fruits. Some of them were fighting snakes. Others were befriending them. That fighting and befriending continue even to this very day. So they were not part of the narrative, but they were there. And my friend said, are you joking? I said, I'm not. Promise not to tell anyone. And that's exactly what I'm going to request from all of you today. Promise not to tell anyone, but that's true. In the Garden of Eden, the LGBTQIA people were there, but they were not part of the groupie, of the selfie. But they were there. Believe me, they were there. That's the reason why Pope Francis said, if a man of goodwill seeks the Lord, who am I to judge? That's when I am angry, when people excludes, when people exclude us, when people say you come from a different category. And diversity. I go back to this wonderful favorite line of my favorite poetess, Maya Angelou. There is beauty and strength in diversity. There is beauty and strength in diversity. We are a tapestry, as I should say. It's a tapestry that contains different colors and different threads. But only because we're diverse that we are strong. And after Paradise, I'm brought to the Marriott Hotel, September 2018. I'm still doing speeches, fighting, convincing, begging people for equality, respect, equal rights, begging people for our own humanity. A humanity that is a birthright. What a travesty of life it is. But you know what? Let me borrow some words from Joanna Sigurdardóttir, the first lesbian prime minister of Iceland, when she said, our time will come. And I repeat the line today. Yes, our time will come. And when the time comes, I promise, I will not be angry anymore. And I will see all of you then. Thank you.